First of all, let me state the simple fact that when you deposit money in a bank, the bank does not put the money into a safe deposit vault. It invests your money in many different forms of credit, in bonds, in commercial paper, in mortgages, and in many other kinds of loans.
A commercial bank right now, if you looked at all of the checking account balances of its regular customers, right? So one person looks at his bank balances and says, oh, I have $700 on deposit with that bank. Some other customer has $1,000, some other has $10,000, and so forth. You added up all those numbers and said, how much collectively does this commercial bank's customer base think they have on deposit with that bank? That number is far greater, typically, than the actual amount of cash that the bank has in the vault.
I can't believe it. There's no money here.
So, for example, if a bank has $100 in deposits, it must, and checking account balances, it must set aside $10 in the event the depositors want their money back.
Anytime you have that situation, you have the possibility that the people who put their money in the bank, or the lenders or the depositors, may say, wait a minute, I don't want to leave my money here, I'm pulling it out, and you have a serious problem for the institution.
So the point is, if everybody showed up on the same day to withdraw his or her money, the bank couldn't pay them off, and there'd be a bank run, and the bank would have to shut down.
Well, you get a bank run when the boom-bust business cycle ends, and you've got multiple people that think they own the money. You thought you owned the money. It turns out the banker said, yes, you own the money, but I've also lent the money to somebody else. Maybe I lent the money to a builder out here, so he thinks he owns the money.
You're thinking of this place all wrong, as if I had the money back in a safe. The money's not here. Well, your money's in Joe's house. That's right next to yours. And in the Kennedy house, and Mrs. Maitland's house, and 100 others.
What?
It's gone. It's all gone.
What's all gone?
The money in your account. It didn't do too well. It's gone.
What do you mean? I have $100.
Not anymore, you don't. Poof.
Well, what can I do to get back
I'm sorry, sir, but this line is for bank members only.
I just opened an account.
Do you have any money invested with this bank?
No, you just lost it all.
Then please stand aside for people who actually have money with us. Next, please.
We think about different industries. There are no runs on other institutions in, say, auto companies, or runs on mining companies, or on universities, or what have you. This seems to be a phenomena uniquely associated with fractional reserve banking.
I think it tends to be unstable when you promise to have money instantaneously available to people so that they can spend these dollars, and at the same time loan them out at various periods of maturity, especially taking money that you that's short term, borrowing from your depositors, money that is short term that can be withdrawn at any moment, and then investing it in mortgages or loaning it out for mortgage loans for 30 years.
But FDR thought he had solved this problem.
They said, we'll create this thing called the FDIC, and if the banker can't pay you, we'll pay you.
Fill this up with regular, please.
Hey, that's my money.
Don't worry about it. It's insured.
She didn't give me no receipt yet. They can't insure it if I don't got no receipt.
Would you please give him a receipt?
Now, this makes customers feel better about their deposits in banks, but it also means that they're not really concerned with how financially sound their banks are.
If you move into a new town and you decide which bank you're going to use, you'll typically decide on what the location is. When I moved to Auburn, there were 2 or 3 banks that were all about as close to where I lived as the rest of them. And I made my decision on which one had the time and temperature right.
If there was no government guaranteed bank accounts, then depositors would be very concerned about what the banks do with their money, and there would be real competition for safety. Banks would not just advertise, that they have the highest yields or the cheapest ATM fees. They would advertise, hey, we got the best portfolio. We have the highest quality of assets. Your money is safe.
In the past, you'd choose a bank based upon whether you thought it was prudently and well managed, and you'd actually get your money back.
Under capitalism, we have a system of profit and loss. Profits encourage risk-taking, losses encourage prudence. Under a system of capitalism or crony capitalism, profits are encouraged. Indeed, profits are privatized, but losses are socialized. There is no downside.
The minute you have the government coming into the banking system and guaranteeing depositors that they can't lose money, then the banks will take a lot of risks with those deposits.
Between the FDIC and the GSEs, the federal government was guaranteeing almost $10 trillion worth of debt. This was the same government that already had $10 trillion of debt on their books. So where would the money come from if they failed?
Well, if the Federal Reserve was on the job, Jimmy Stewart could call up the local Fed office.
So you have the natural problems going along with easy money and credit and artificial interest rates, but then it encourages even more risky behavior because there's always the lender of last resort.
The Federal Reserve's very existence gave banks the incentive to be as leveraged as possible.
People were able to make very risky bets with banks' money, or taxpayer money as it turned out. And if you give people an opportunity to gamble with no downside, they're going to do it.
Some of the issues you deal with are properly approached through a sophisticated, risk-based set of capital standards, with a sophisticated regulator applying those risk-based capital standards.
Those regulations were rewarding the banks for getting into housing, especially if they packaged them into securities.
From the conversation I've heard today is that the consensus is that we just don't have enough regulations, and all we need is a world-class regulator and everything is going to be okay. And I think we're failing to look at the real problem and the cause of our crisis that we face. I'm concerned that we're going to have a world-class adjustment to the distortions that we, the Congress, the Fed, and the Treasury has created over these last several decades, and it seems like there's essentially no concern about that.